It's morning in America.
I've told you, if I've told you once, I told you 1,000 times. We need new attractions.
Right.
We need more attractions. So, oh, that's way too hot to drink yet. Way too hot. So, I wanted to, this is a very funny time. This is a very funny time, you guys. I'm very happy about it. So, I wanted to do a stream because I'm trying to conceptualize the phenomenon that is Trump, because he is the pinnacle of American culture and capitalist culture and just this insane drive to just go as hard as possible, double down every time you're given the opportunity, like lose until you win type capitalism. And he really is the pinnacle of like what America envisions as like success, like down to the golden apartment and stuff, right? And so I'm interested in like I'm interested in there's an argument, right, between people who say Trump is a populist that is talking about things like we need to put America first. We need to spend less money on wars. We need to bring jobs back home. We need to increase manufacturing, right? And that because of that rhetoric that was backed up by basically no action, let's keep that in mind. But because of that rhetoric, he is really like a working man's president. And because of that rhetoric, he was able to move enough people in key areas like Michigan and Ohio and places like that, Pennsylvania and places like that, and win enough votes to where the Electoral College shifted enough to where he, fell down the Plinko board and became president, right? So, or was this phenomenon just simply a complete failure on the part of the Hillary Clinton campaign and by extension the Democrats, right? So I'm trying to figure out, because if we don't conceptualize history realistically, then we are going to just keep doing dumb shit. Like, we are just going to keep doing shit that makes absolutely no sense, doesn't further our point, and is counterintuitive to the whole project, right? So my thought on this is Hillary Clinton was a uniquely disliked candidate. Yes? Donald Trump was a incredibly famous television personality that was willing to say that Hillary Clinton was the worst. He was willing to say some of the things, like he was willing to own her at a more like visceral level on television than Hillary was able to counter that, right? So I don't want to write off Trump as a like circus that we just let come to town for 4 years. I don't think that that's true. I think that there are aspects of the Republican Party that obviously fed in to Trump, namely selling out the party to, or not selling out the party, but crafting the entire messaging of the party around white evangelicals and just general like racist tones. I mean, dog whistling, sometimes not dog whistling, like just constantly talking about stuff like Law and Order and the suburbs and crack You know, like drug use and crime, that sort of stuff, right? Being tough on crime candidates and stuff like that. I think that there is an aspect of the Republican Party that got us to that point and eventually drove us to Trump, and of course the absence of the Democrats to do anything meaningful except capitulate in the direction of Republicans to accomplish all of their nefarious bullshit, if not just water it down a little bit and accomplish it anyway. Of course, that led to Trump, right? But I think that but in the same way, I think that Trump was not an inevitability. The stars had to align where, yes, you were driving the party that way, but you had to have a uniquely positioned candidate in Trump who was, let's be honest, like uniquely liked by regular people. And by liked, I mean you would turn on the TV to watch him. Like, basically, I don't mean liked like you would go and have a beer with the guy or anything like that. It was just like, oh, well, he's more interesting. And ultimately, that's all that we care about, right? And so you had Trump, a uniquely positioned candidate who was uniquely popular, but also willing to sling mud more than regular politicians. But then also you had him running against a uniquely unpopular candidate. Someone who people really, 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 really did not like. Like, it didn't like her so much, in fact, that non-voters came out to vote against her. Like, she had a negative effect on turnout in most of the key spots that she lost, and those were the votes that ended up flipping the Electoral College. And so this is a very long-winded way of getting to the fact that, like, Trumpism is not an effective political force. Now, Trumpism, when it is given the steering wheel of the Republican Party, absolutely, it is effective. But I think that Mitch McConnell, I mean, okay, so here's an example. Yesterday, Trump, or today or something, Trump tweets, like 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever, when he's on the shitter. Trump tweets that negotiations for the coronavirus stimulus or whatever are going to stop until the election. And if he wins, we'll get coronavirus relief, right? So, the implications of that are this. What he's basically saying is, hey, elect me and I'll give you money, right? Which, okay, that's just regular, dumb, hokey, like real estate developer bribery bullshit. Fine. But the implicit or the implied meaning there is, if I don't win, then not only will you not get money November, but also December, and probably not January, because I'm in that motherfucker until January 25th. And then maybe they get their act together in February and maybe you get some money. But at the very least, if I lose, you're 6 months out from getting paid. You're 6 months out from getting any sort of relief to anybody that needs it. Now, I know that this has been a thing. Like, people have said what I'm about to say a million times about a million different nonsense scandals and media invented like pearl clutching moments throughout the Trump presidency. But this action, what he did, that tweet, cost him the election. He will. I'm going to say right now he's going to lose, and probably pretty big. Now, when I say he's going to lose, I mean he's going to lose on paper. Now, he could do whatever finaglery to change that reality. I'm just saying that, like, when it's all said and done and all the cards fall, he will have lost mathematically. Now, like I said, wonkery aside and legal trickery and Supreme Court aside, that's just all that I'm saying. Because there are like two issues that Americans care about right now, and they're both coronavirus. One is the coronavirus. The second is, hey, we're all broke. We're all sitting here with no income, with no job. I'm way behind. People are way behind on car payments, mortgages, rent. And this stuff is not just being waived. It's stacking up into piles. And when coronavirus is over and people haven't been working, they're going to be expected to pay thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in back mortgages, back rent, back installments on student loans, whatever. And none of that shit has been alleviated. There's been a Band-Aid put on it so that it's not due right now, but all of it's going to come due eventually. And people are starting to make that calculation in their head. And not just people that are in that specific situation, but people who aren't and have money. They're starting to make a calculation of like, wait, hold on. A lot of people aren't working. A lot of shit's closed. This can only go on for so long. People are starting to make that calculation. And so, Trump, I mean, imagine this. Trump, instead of making the decision to literally win re-election by saying like, fuck it, I'm printing all the money and we're sending everybody $10,000 or whatever. Here we go. He wins because everybody will be psyched. Yeah, not psyched, but everybody will be relieved, right? That they got some sort of action from the federal government that A, proves that this is a real problem, and B, helps their material conditions. But then also, it would be incredibly popular. It would be incredibly popular. Not only would he win bigly. And he won't do it. Instead, the choice that he makes is I'm going to hold the American public over the railing like Batman and be like, hey, you vote for me and I'll give you $1,200, basically. But because he is a buffoon and because he is being played, and I'll get to that in a second. Because he's a buffoon and because he's being played, he's not calculating the fact that Joe Biden is going to do it too. That Joe Biden is also going to cut checks to people. That the Democrats want to cut checks to people more than Donald Trump says he wants to cut checks to people, and they want to cut bigger checks and more checks to people. And, feel however you want about that, but, dude, this is a pretty binary choice. Like, Trump give people money, Biden give people money, they're both going to do it. So, whatever. It's just a matter of how much, and when, and how frequently. It's a separation of plans. But he's not calculating for that. He's not figuring that like, oh, no, I can hold this over them. But as soon as Joe Biden wins, and if Joe Biden wins the way that it looks like he's going to win, the Republicans are also going to lose the Senate, which means that there's going to be a Democratic majority everywhere at the federal level. Now, the last time that this happened, the Democrats did absolutely nothing with it, and so it will be very, very, very funny while they have complete control of government and they make up excuses on why they can't do shit. But regardless, I just don't understand it. And I do understand it, and that's what I wanted to get to. This is the point that I wanted to get to. Trump is being played, and by extension, everybody that votes for him is being played. Okay? The Republican Party, the only way that Mitch McConnell, you have to understand, Mitch McConnell, very smart guy. Cretin. Complete waste of human existence, of course. But very, very smart guy, Mitch McConnell. And he understands how politics works. He understands how elections work. And he understands the dynamic of the federal government. And so Mitch McConnell is making a calculation. He is figuring that Trump is going to lose. That is the only reason that he would allow the Senate negotiations to just not only fizzle at a time where people need help, but blow up so publicly and make the Republicans look like assholes so hard. And I know there are a lot of people that are like, well, the reason that he threw it out was because the Democrats were trying to put a lot of pork in it. Who cares? The Republicans got $4 trillion worth of pork in the last coronavirus bill. If the Democrats want to get state and local funding, okay. Okay. Who cares? Who cares? Like, we'll get it back later. We'll tax it back later. That's fine. But right now, we got to get money to people who are hurting. Even if we have to sign off on bullshit. We sign off on bullshit all the time. We sign off on shit that we disagree with all the time to get something to get the thing that we want. These compromises get made all the time. Of course, the Republicans don't make them. The Democrats do. But the theory applies. So Mitch McConnell has made the calculation that Trump is going to lose. And when he loses, Trump with him will take Trumpism. Because I don't think that you can recreate Trump's base without a unique figure like Trump. Because Trump has this like I said at the beginning, a persona of like American success and being, it's bullshit, but being like a American successful by your bootstraps kind of guy, right? Like he has embodied the myth that the Republicans have been selling for 40 years. Now, do I think that, oh dude, what the hell? Now, so Mitch McConnell's making the calculation that, okay, look, here's what we can do. All right, we're going to lose Trump, but we're going to get our Supreme Court nomination. So I have completely and irrevocably changed the judicial system in this country forever, basically, for everyone living in it right now, lifetime. Everyone living in it right now's lifetime. I have changed the judicial system. I'm going to get another Supreme Court justice, and we're I'm not going to lose re-election. I'm still going to be in office when he's not going to lose to Amy, whatever her name is. That's not going to happen. So he's going to win his election, and he's going to stay in the Senate. Now, he will be the minority leader if the Democrats flip the Senate, which it looks like they will. But he will stay in the Senate. And so his plan, his calculation, because again, Mitch McConnell, very smart guy. He is calculating that Trump will lose, Democrats will win the White House, he will have Joe Biden, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic House to contend with. And what he will do is fundraise and lead a grassroots messaging the way that they do, and make buku bucks for the Republican National Committee and getting state Senate and state houses flipped and making all sorts of local changes and blah, 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 blah. He will raise all sorts of top-level money for that kind of stuff off of opposition. Just sending out an email that says, your radical left president, Joe Biden, wants to pass the Green New Deal. Send us $10 so that we can fund the defense or whatever. And he will raise millions upon millions upon millions of dollars for his own reelection, for the reelection of other Republicans, for the election of new craven nutbags that will come sweeping in 2020 because in 2022 because the Democrats will have made very little changes to people's material lives, and so people will be like, well, shit, that didn't work electing Joe Biden, so I'll just go back and elect some Republicans. Because that's how this shit works. You have to materially change people's lives. And because Mitch McConnell has a reasonable and rational understanding of the power of the United States presidency, which there is very little. What can the president do unilaterally? Very little. Now, sure, if you were like a radical and you wanted to go in as president and tie into a nice little bow all of the policies that we say we support, like free college and health, Medicare for all, and all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of executive orders that you could write. There are a lot of actions that you could take as the chief executive to either enforce laws that are on the books right now, or fudge a couple of laws, or just write proclamation, or just write executive orders into law, or into action. But you can't really do enough from just the presidential level to fundamentally change the country the way that it needs to be changed to help people. You can move stuff, and you can really get the ball rolling in the right direction, but you can't. It's going to require the Senate, at least, to do some basic things that need to be done. For instance, we need to rebalance the court and delegitimize it as a political organization and move it back as if it ever was, but move it back into obscurity and an inability to swing legislation that, in theory, that our representatives have passed. We need things like, we need the Senate to take action on things like DC statehood, Puerto Rico statehood. We need the state to take we need the Senate to take action on things like a jobs program. Like, this sort of stuff has to be allocated from the Senate. The Senate distributes the money. And so you've got to control that branch of government at least. You can get by with a House minority because, like the Republicans have been doing, if you are a strong enough president and you can work with the Senate, and it's you're fighting the war on two fronts, and you have an advantage, even if the Supreme Court is conservative. But that's not what's going to happen. The Democrats are going to get in, and they're going to go, well, shit, we spent all this money helping people originally. We can't help people anymore. We're broke now. Look, we're broke. Look at our pockets. They're empty. We spent all our lunch money. So, that being said, I just want, if anybody hate watches these, or watches these for whatever reason, and you are a Trump supporter, okay, I just want you to know that it's okay, right? You could make the argument, okay? Let me play this out. You could make the argument that Trump ran a campaign where he was talking about issues that were, now this was in 2016, mind you, that working people cared about, that spoke to the issues with outsourcing, downsizing, the gig economy. He talked about a lot of issues that really affect people's lives. Wages, farmers, steel, immigration, and the way that he talked about it, as far as like, hey, if your America is full of immigrants, there's not enough to go around for everybody, which is nonsense, but that's effective. And working class people listen to that because they're like, oh shit, my job. Because in the way that we live society, your job is literally keeping you alive. And so, you can make the argument that he ran a, quote unquote populist campaign. And maybe you signed up and you voted for him and you jumped on the Trump train because you were like, woo woo, he's finally speaking truth to power, and also fuck Hillary Clinton, and also he's saying things that I think could be better for our economy. Okay? And then maybe you rode that train for a while because it was obvious that the Democrats were being just feckless idiots and were coming up with all sorts of nonsense stories and nonsense reasons to impeach him. And you kept riding the train because you were like, look, this is lesser of two evil shit. And ultimately, the Democrats are just being obstructionist, and they are throwing Trump under the bus. Now, I would remind you, with the media, that the Republicans did nothing but obstruct Obama. But okay, I'm still following you. And you remain on the Trump train through the Kavanaugh thing because you're like, dude, they're being incredibly unfair. This lady doesn't have any proof, which again, to each his own, I guess. That was botched by both people and should have never happened anyway. And maybe you stuck with him through the travel ban, right? Which is really where you should have got off. But, okay, like, I could understand there's been 20 years of just, like, ramping people up about so-called Islamic countries and so-called Islamic terrorism and the unique threat that the Middle East poses to us and terrorism in general poses to us. And so maybe you stayed on the train because you were like, well, I've been hyped up by that. And then maybe you stayed on the train through the whole beginning of the protests, right? As far as like, well, this is kind of getting out of control and people are causing damage. They're burning stuff down. The original George Floyd protests and stuff. And this is, I'm getting all of my information from, sources that are talking a lot about the property damage and the destruction that's going on. And I haven't really seen a lot of the police just absolutely kicking the living shit out of people. So I'm going to stay on the Trump train because law and order, and it's really scary to me that these people are out in the streets. And it's also bullshit that they have no goal. And when I do hear anything about their goal, it's normally something about hating white people, and I don't like that. Okay. So you're on the Trump train, firmly into 2020. Okay? It was at about that point that I was thinking Trump's going to win re-election. Biden had just won the nomination. Everything was going fairly okay. I mean, COVID was ravaging China. We were hearing stories about the Chinese government having to build hospitals whole cloth in 3 days. Completely from flat land to a hospital in 3 days because they were having these huge outbreaks. And, it was on the horizon, but it kind of seemed like another, like, it might come here and a couple people might get sick, but it's never going to affect anybody. And Trump I would have told you, January, early February of this year, Trump was going to win re-election. It was going to be very easy. Joe Biden was going to fall on his face and lose. Okay? So if you were still riding the Trump train, I could be understanding of that, I suppose. I could be I don't know if understanding is the right word, but I could be empathetic from your position because I think that I share a very similar position to the Democratic Party. It's just that my answer to that was Bernie, not Trump. And if you listen to Bernie and Trump talk, they are talking about the same things. They just have radically different answers for them. Because the problems are obvious. The problems in America are obvious. They are very obvious to everyone. I said this a couple streams ago. Americans are not stupid. They understand what's going on around them. They understand that we have over-financialized our system, and therefore nobody does anything real anymore. We don't make anything. We don't export anything. We don't make anything that we can buy. We buy everything from other countries. We owe a bunch of money to other countries. We are absolutely cash-strapped because we're spending so much money colonizing countries that most people can't find on a fucking map. People see these problems. Insane healthcare costs. Insane education costs. People see this. They see it. They know. They're not dumb. And it means a whole lot more to them than who can use what bathroom and, who can get married to who. These are all ginned up issues to stop talking about the real things that people see are a problem. And people see that problem and they draw a line to Trump. People see that problem and they draw a line to Bernie. those lines are largely determined by your cultural upbringing, your familial environment, your party affiliation. They have nothing to do with your class, for the most part. They have nothing to do with, really, yeah, they have nothing to do with your class or your resources. Those lines are developed for completely extant reasons. For shit like, my dad's a Republican, or my dad's a veteran, or something like that, or my parents talked about Reagan all the time as the best president ever, and I see some analogous stuff there. There's dumb reasons why people make these decisions, just like there's dumb reasons why people make the Bernie decision. And yeah, so I could see you, back to the Trump train thing, I could see you early 2020, I could see somebody still being on the Trump train and being like, okay. But let's pause right there. In order for you to still be on the Trump train, even then, before any of the circumstances of the last 6 months have happened, you have to acknowledge, if your argument, so I'm going to admit, I've kind of walked you into a trap here. If you are this one person, or if you are this person that watches this stream, if you agree with everything that I just said, okay, then you also have to acknowledge the fact that yes, Trump ran on economic populism, and yes, Trump told everybody that he was going to fix our broken tax system, our broken manufacturing, our broken businesses, our broken economy, right? All while ignoring the fact that his signature accomplishment, the only significant piece of legislation that he passed as a president, was a tax cut that directly benefited the people, him and people like him. So, if that's not an A to B connect the dot perfect encapsulation of the fact that you got played, you got absolutely played. And that's okay, dude. Politicians play people. That's what they do. But as an individual, you have to recognize that, like, oh, this is a game. This is just a bullshit game. He's bullshitting me. He's bullshitting everybody. Right? But he's bullshitting me specifically because I've been on the Trump train. And I've been on the Trump train forever and ever and ever, right? If you're this person. Okay, cool. So you're on the Trump train, beginning of 2020. Riots break out. There's property damage. You want to see law and order restored. Okay. Now, remember, you should have gotten off the Trump train a while ago. But let's just go over some of the stuff that I remember off the top of my head over the last 6 months where you stayed on the Trump train. He says something like, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, which is a callback to shit that, like, the Klan used to say. Like, that's a quote lifted from, like, white people, white pride people that killed black people in the early 20th century because they were rioting or whatever. People that put together militias and shit. Okay? He downplayed coronavirus and said it was no worse than the flu, a disease which he now has, and a disease which now everyone around him, including Chris Christie, who is severely, obviously compromised in the situation, are all infected with COVID-19. He infected his own wife because he refuses to wear a mask, and the White House was not following any sort of CDC guidelines at all. There's a story on it. You can look it up. They were not following social distancing. They were not enforcing wearing a mask. They were not enforcing, washing your hands, any sort of precautions whatsoever, because their theory was, well, we're getting tested all the time. And so we'll know who has it and we can quarantine them, except they never quarantined anybody. The first person that actually got quarantined was like a couple of months ago. They sent everybody home that worked in that area, but they weren't near the president. The next person that got sick in the White House was his closest personal aide, Hope Hicks. Literally the lady that follows him around all day long. So he downplays COVID-19 as it's starting, and he says it's no worse than the flu, and in fact, it will go away. It's a miracle. It's like a miracle. It will go away. Okay, you stayed on the Trump train for that. Then you stayed on the Trump train when when people were protesting outside of the White House, and he hid in a bunker like a little bitch. Okay, then you stayed on the Trump train when protesters were outside of the White House the next day or a couple of days later, and he knew that he looked like a little bitch staying in the bunker. So what he did was he turned tear gas on those people so that he could walk across the street and have a meaningless photo op and say nothing, in fact. Just take a picture holding the Bible and then walk back so that he could shoot a campaign video to raise fundraising dollars. Okay? Then, and you're still on the Trump train, remember. Remember, you're still on the Trump train at this point. Okay. Then he continues to downplay coronavirus and even suggests that, now, sarcastically or no, he uses the podium inside of the White House to make a joke when I think at the time 40,000 Americans had been killed by coronavirus, that we could just inject bleach or something, which he now is calling a sarcastic comment. He said at the debate that that was sarcasm, and you're being ridiculous by calling him on that. Okay, well, then you stayed on the Trump train for a president that was being sarcastic at the White House podium as 40,000 Americans were dead. Okay, still on the Trump train. Remember, you're still on the Trump train. Then the president schedules his first in-person rally in Tulsa on the anniversary of Black Wall Street being actually bombed with airplanes by white supremacists in order to shut down a successful city full of black people and run by black people. You stage it on the 100-year anniversary of that happening or whatever, and or 50 year or something like that, and on Juneteenth, which is bold as fuck. So you stayed on the Trump train for that because maybe that was like a media thing they're making up. Okay. You stayed on the Trump train while he defended the Senate's inability to pass coronavirus relief. You stayed on the Trump train while while stories were coming out that were saying he was saying the troops were losers and suckers, which of course he said that. You stayed on the Trump train while he now we skipped over the fact that he assassinated the head of the Iranian army, basically the Iranian Secretary of Defense, assassinated him by drone strike, just to big dick it. He did that. And then we've completely skipped over the fact that you stayed on the Trump train after an American journalist was murdered by the Saudis. He was lured into the Saudi embassy, chopped up into little pieces with a bone saw, and taken out the back door in a bucket. An American journalist. And you stayed on the Trump train while Trump went, well, we don't really know what happened. And even if that did happen, he didn't really, he said some bad things about the government. And so we got to let them do what they got to do. Oh, you also stayed on the Trump train while 4,000 Puerto Ricans died due to the hurricane. And he went there and threw paper towels at them. Now, I know that this all seems like liberal pearl-clutching bullshit, but this kind of stuff matters when you're the president of the United States. I'm sorry. These people have been ravaged by a natural disaster. And the motherfucker goes there and throws paper towels at them. The motherfucker goes there and, we've done a great job. We've done a great job. Not that many people have died. And then he leaves and never comes back. Never helps them whatsoever. In fact, raided that money. Raided that money for, goddamn, there's a fly in here. Raided that money for other shit. You So you're still on the Trump train. You stay on the Trump train when the story comes out about the fact that we didn't have enough personal protective equipment stockpiled at the Pentagon for doctors and emergency health personnel, because the Pentagon, who is supposed to store that sort of stuff in the event of, a pandemic and a threat to national security, that is supposed to have the equipment, like in the post-apocalyptic movies, when like the Department of Defense and FEMA and all that are deployed to like where the aliens landed, and they set up all these temporary hospitals and they help people. Yeah. All that money got spent on got spent on jets to fly over and bomb brown people. All of it. And that stuff's gone. And that happened under the Trump administration. And you stayed on the Trump train. You also stayed on the Trump train when he gassed immigrants at the border. You stayed on the Trump train while he told police officers to, quote, dominate the battle space, when you had police officers walking down the street and shooting people with rubber bullets inside their own homes, standing in their doorways, on their property. You stayed on the Trump train when 3 police officers gave a no-knock warrant to the wrong house in the middle of the night in plain clothes, and when they were fired upon because the person living inside there thought that they were being robbed, they fired back 21 times and shot a sleeping woman 7 times, and no one was charged. The only person that was charged for wanton damage to property of other apartments. And Trump does nothing about this because he has the ability to do so. He runs the Department of Justice. He does nothing about this, and you stayed on the Trump train. You stayed on the Trump train and, by extension, the Republican train when Philando Castile was pulled over and let the officer know, with his daughter and his wife in the car, and let the officer know that he was licensed to carry a concealed handgun. And when he reached for his wallet, the officer shot him in front of his family. And nothing was done. You stayed with him. You stayed on the Trump train when Jeffrey Epstein was, when his depositions came out and listed Donald Trump as being with him on multiple occasions. When multiple lawsuits have been brought and multiple documents have come out of these lawsuits saying that Trump has credibly sexually assaulted underage women, girls, children. You stayed on the Trump train. Now, keep in mind, most of the stuff that I'm listing has happened over the last 6 months. You stayed on the Trump train when he went to the presidential debate, maybe knowingly having coronavirus at the time. At the very least, we know that he knew he had coronavirus when he went to a meeting with both the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because they all have coronavirus now. They're all in quarantine now. And the biggest Republican donors in the country at his own golf course. He knew he had coronavirus then and still went to those meetings and did not wear a mask. Trump has disabled the continuity of government. He is a bioweapon. He has disabled most of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a large majority of the White House staff. Dude, this fly. Dude, why? A large majority of the White House staff, most of his family, most of his family, and God knows who else, through his rallies, through, like I said, his donor meetings. He had to meet with the Supreme Court Justice. I think that she's tested negative. And what is his messaging out of that? The messaging out of the White House now, Kamala Harris and the Democrats asked for a plexiglass separator between her and Mike Pence because he's from a more infectious place than Australia in the White House. The response from the White House is, well, if Kamala Harris wants to build a fortress around herself, that's fine. Totally being like, blah. You stayed on the Trump train when he was hospitalized with COVID, magically left in 3 days. The White House will not release whether he's had a negative test or not, so he has not, because if he had, they would immediately put that information out. And then went to the White House, stood in front of the entire press pool on live national television, perhaps the most watched event of his entire presidency globally, because everybody's like, holy shit, the president is sick, takes his mask off, and then turns around and films what can only be described as a propaganda video where he says, don't be afraid of coronavirus, it's no big deal, we're going to beat this. I got good care, I got right over it, maybe I'm immune now, who knows? When 209,000 people are dead. The implication there being, look, I'm strong. Those people were weak. The strong will survive. Basically. So through all of that nonsense, through all of that, you stayed on the Trump train. And you try to tell me that your calculation is, well, the Democrats are bad too. Yes, that is correct. The Democrats are bad too. And you are right. But the Democrats have passed 4 separate coronavirus relief bills. 4. In the House. The Democrats have passed meaningful gun laws, gun control legislation in the House. They have passed meaningful wage reform in the House. Medicare reform in the House. I mean, go down the list. Every single issue that Americans care about, the House is passing bills all the time about this shit. Hundreds and hundreds of bills. Only for them to die in the Senate, which is run by Republicans, and by extension, Donald Trump, who's the leader of their party. Now, you could disagree with what is in those bills. You could disagree with what they are doing. That's fine. And we can have a debate about what sort of money should be spent on what programs. I think it's fairly clear where I stand on that. That's fine. But to argue that they are the same is pretty absurd. I mean, it's pretty crazy at this point. The evidence is overwhelmingly in the other direction. And after all of this that I've just listed, you remain on the Trump train when he threatens the American people with their livelihood. I mean, the extension of unemployment in this country raised the poverty level. That's how bad off people are. Is that just by giving people an extra $300 a week or $600 a week or whatever it was, $600 a week, you raised the poverty level in this country, or lowered the poverty level, I mean. Less people were in poverty by doing that. And he is holding that over people's head. He is saying, I will not allow, because ultimately he's got to sign it. I will not allow, A, negotiations to continue, but B, any relief to be passed until I am elected. Now, again, he's being stupid, and that's a dumb, that's not going to accomplish anything, because Joe Biden is also going to pass coronavirus relief. It's not like Donald Trump's the only one that's come up with this idea. But I'm less concerned. Donald Trump is a fixture of our universe. He is going to do what he is going to do. His gravitational field is going to attract what his gravitational field attracts and repel what it repels. I'm more concerned about the type of person that claims to be politically knowledgeable and claims to understand what is really going on in American society. Looking at this and deriving the solution as Trump is good in any measurable fashion. Now, if your entire metric of political accomplishment and success and being a good president is owning the libs, if that's the only thing that you were looking for, okay, then sail on down the way on your Trump train, on the Trump wagon. Go ahead. But all of the things that I just listed, you had to consciously, because all the things that I just listed are just the things that I remember off the top of my head. These aren't any of the little micro things that happened over the last 4 years that have completely eroded away any function of government. I mean, things like failing to staff most of the federal government. I mean, just failing to fill positions. He has multiple members of his administration that are serving illegally because they have not been confirmed by Congress. They are doing a job that it is illegal for them to be doing. Multiple members. These problems are going to exist decades from now. Yeah, you can talk about how the judiciary is going to have problems. You know, we're going to be fighting a radically right-wing judiciary for the next 30 years. Yeah, that's true. But we're also going to be fighting a radically depleted governing state. Things like the EPA, the post office, the FEC. These are critical institutions to running our government. These aren't things like, you know, the National Institute for Forest Fire Prevention, although that is important. These are things like the Federal Elections Commission. These are things like the Federal Communications, the FCC. What does that stand for? These are things like the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Like, real things that have implications on people's daily lives, on where people can live, on where people can go to school, on where people can work. And they have been torn down over the last 4 years. And I didn't even mention any of that. I was just talking about the big, like, oh, look, that was on CNN stuff. And the fact is, in order to still remain on the Trump train, you have to reconcile all of that, okay, with the idea that the only notable thing that Trump has accomplished, and by notable, I mean actually affects people's daily lives, okay? Like, yes, has he signed some executive orders about helping kids with autism? Has he pardoned people that were unjustly imprisoned? Has he, made certain tweaks to the economy to where unemployment was low for a while? Has he signed criminal justice reform by executive order? Sure. But those things are all reversible, and they're all fairly inconsequential. Because if your bet on him is lowest unemployment ever, best economy ever, look how that all just went in the toilet in 6 months. So, all that we can look at from an objective standpoint, facts don't care about your feelings, remember? All we can care about then is the actual factual accomplishments of the Trump presidency. And what are they? The tax cut and the repeal of the individual mandate in Obamacare. Those are the two signature accomplishments. If Trump wanted to run on what he did materially, those would be the two things that he would talk about. Okay? And those are substantial. They are substantial things. But they run completely counter to your supposed theory on why you're still on the Trump train. If your supposed theory is any of the arguments that I just laid out for you, things like he made a good economic point, he really spoke truth to power, he looked like he was looking out for regular people, okay, then that's fine. I have absolved you of that vote, and I have absolved you of supporting him because I agree with you. He did say all those things. But unfortunately, my friend, this motherfucker has taken that shit and thrown it into the garbage disposal and turned that motherfucker on. He does not care. He does not care because his signature achievement, the biggest piece of legislation that he signed, runs directly counter to that entire narrative. We know now, the numbers are in. The tax cut gave 80% of the tax cuts went to the top 1%. The money made was all funneled to the top. off that tax cut. That did not help regular people. Yes, you might have seen a little extra money in your paycheck. But ultimately, for every dollar that you saw extra in your paycheck, somebody super rich got a couple of $100,000. It wasn't close. So, all that to say, if you are somebody, or you know somebody, who is still on the Trump train, then it is time to stop taking these people seriously about politics. Because they are not doing politics, they are doing owning the libs. And that's not the same. They're not doing, and they like to dress it up as politics. I really look at all the issues, and I take in both sides, and I think about it, and I think the Democrats are bad. You're probably right. Democrats are bad. I agree with you. The Democrats are bad. Of course. Of course. Joe Biden wrote and passed the crime bill. Joe Biden spent an entire career destabilizing our economy by helping Wall Street get everything that they wanted. Joe Biden was pro-segregation. He was anti-school. He was anti-busing. He has on multiple occasions done some really weird, old, creepy grandpa stuff to little girls. Yeah. All that stuff's very true. Kamala Harris, she's a cop. She is the reason that Steve Mnuchin is allowed to be our Treasury Secretary and run rampant over our economy is because she failed to prosecute him after he committed more than 1,000 crimes in the state of California. Nancy Pelosi is a goblin who sounds like she has had a stroke every day for the last 15 years of her life and has done absolutely fuck all to help anyone and pass any meaningful legislation. And the only meaningful legislation that I listed before that she did pass is only because she knew that it would be defeated in the Senate. And so she doesn't have to pay any sort of political price or do anything. But in the meantime, she has spent every waking moment of her life punching people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Ilhan Omar in the face whenever she gets the opportunity. And throwing things like the Green New Dream or whatever, as she calls it, under the bus. Chuck Schumer is an actual moron. The guy does not understand how politics works. He thinks that he has made up this is real, he has a fictitious family called the Baileys that he has made up. They do not exist. He pretends that they live in upstate New York and they are upper middle class white folks. And he crafts all of his policy surrounding this imaginary family that he has completely invented out of whole cloth. That's real. That's a real thing. Yes, both sides, very bad. Very, very bad. But the answer to that is not to more deeply entrench these people's power. We have to reform this shit. Radically. Very, very radically. Now, we can argue about what that looks like. I would argue that we need to return more power to the middle class. We need to make sure that workers are paying their fair share of taxes, but that their taxes are then giving them things like healthcare and education, a job if they're supplying the funds needed to create a federal jobs program to rebuild our infrastructure, things like that. You may disagree with some of those points. You may believe that moving forward as a country is going to require different things. That's a totally reasonable, logical conversation to have, and I would love to have it. But you cannot do that by entrenching and structurally entombing right-wing ideology and Trumpism. Because it is clearly selling you what you think you want and doing the opposite. And that is why I think that the tweet about, like, you'll get your money when I'm reelected is the death knell for the Trump campaign. Because some things in politics are supposed to be quiet. And Trump does them all out loud. Okay? Yes, everyone is a racist in politics most of the time because it works to people's benefit. You can say things like they're going to take the suburbs from you, and white people will come out and vote for you. Affluent white people will come out and vote for you. Or you can say things like Mexicans are bad and they're coming to take your job, and working class people will come and vote for you. You can scare people about China, and working class people will come and vote for you, right? But there is a line that the American people have drawn in the sand, and that is they do not like being openly bullshitted. They do not like you saying things like black people are criminals out loud. So maybe not openly bullshitted. Let me take that back. They don't like you being explicit. It's like that lady that we watched on the stream the other day where she's like, she knows that she has a problem with public housing, and she knows that she has a problem with the people who live in public housing, but she has never allowed herself to take a moment and actually materialize that into why. She just intrinsically knows that it's a problem, but she has never thought about why she feels that way. And when that journalist forced her to come up with a reason why she feels that way, she immediately went, oh, well, they're not the same class as us. I know that sounds bad. And a lot of people, including right-wingers, saw that video and went, oh, this is kind of gross. Because it says the quiet part out loud. And Trump says the quiet part out loud. And you can get away with that on certain things. But when it comes to money that people need to eat, and you say I'm literally using this as a bargaining chip to win the election, or I'm literally using this as a bribe, people, they're not going to respond well to that. They're just not. I'm sorry. You are not going to convince me that today was the day that officially Trump lost. You could have said it was when he got coronavirus, but there was a possibility for him to come out of the hospital and be like, look, this is very serious. I understand now. I apologize for my past behavior. We're going to take care of this, and we're going to mobilize the full force of the federal government and make sure that this works out. And he could have saved that and probably won the election. Then he took his mask off and he did the opposite thing. And you could have still said, okay, that's a little that's pretty bad. But he could still probably clean that up and be like, look, I just took, I don't even know how he would clean that up, but he probably could. But this, literally threatening the middle class, who has been, and really millennials, who have been eviscerated by this financial crisis, but also this pandemic. Those people are threatening those people is very dumb. It's very, very dumb. And so I think that's it. And so, like I said, no hard feelings. I'm not gonna, disown you or anything if you're, still on the train. I'm just telling you that you have to, because, at the end of the day, politics is all just bullshit. We can't individually do anything to change anything. This has to, until there's massive collective action, what the fuck are you gonna do, right? So, look, if you're still on the Trump train, okay, whatever. But just know that, everyone sees it. This is very clear. This is very, very, very clear that it's a game and you got played. And that's okay. I know how you feel because I got played by Obama. If you'll remember, Obama ran a campaign of I'm going to help people, and we got too much money in politics, and we got to get single payer healthcare. And then turned around and did none of that stuff, and in fact bombed a whole bunch more people, expanded our war machine, forgave the people that did the financial crash before, forgave the people that tortured folks in black sites. I mean, on and on and on. Did the opposite of what he was supposed to do, but just put a really nice face on it. And so I know how you feel. I know how you feel. I do. I feel it in my bones. It's very upsetting. I get it, man. It is very, very upsetting. Because you feel like you won, right? Like you feel like you finally put somebody in charge that is going to own the other side. Not only own the other side, but also like finally understand like, okay, regular people need me to move the wheels and levers of government like this. And so I'm going to go and do it. And to hell with everybody else, I'm going to go and do it. And when somebody says something rude to me, I'm going to own them. And that shows that I am going to be willing to wield the handles of power in the way that people want me to. Right? And then they get into office and they do the opposite. And they fuck you over. I know the feeling. I feel you. I completely sympathize. Okay? Because Obama did it to me twice. I feel you. That man got elected twice. So I feel you. But the answer is not to continue to own the libs. It's let me draw you a straight line. What was the mainstream Democrats' plan to deal with Trump? It was to make scandal out of scandal, investigation out of investigation, and own the conservatives as much as possible, right? Like, try to destroy them with, like, bullshit, nonsense, scandals, and conspiracies. Russia, Comey, all that bullshit, right? And the Democrats held on to this idea that if we just convince people that Trump is a unique threat to the fabric of America, a unique problem that is unprecedented, then we will win. Okay? And absent coronavirus, if coronavirus had never happened, that would have failed. It would not have worked. The only reason Joe Biden is the luckiest Plinko ball in the game. I hope that Plinko's the right thing that I'm thinking of. He's the luckiest Plinko ball in the game because he got the entire Democratic establishment worth of candidates to drop out at the same time so that he could win in South Carolina, where he had a unique position to win, even though he was in like 4th place at the time. And Bernie had won the first 3 states, which had never happened before. And he got Obama to intervene. Obama comes in, intervenes for him. Everybody drops out. He wins a crucial state. He goes to the debate, and even though he's an addled, dementia-ridden old man, he performs unbelievably at the debate and smacks Bernie around a little bit, wins the rest of the election. Then he is met by an unprecedented pandemic that allows for him to campaign entirely from his home under extremely controlled circumstances where they can put out the best version of this addled old man out into the public. And then Trump lights himself on fire in every possible way for 6 months and just nosedives in the polls by continuously doubling down on doing the wrong thing that people do not like. Over and over and over and over and over again. And now it looks like he's going to win huge. Joe Biden is the luckiest Plinko ball in the game. But Trump, right, is... I don't know, man. I guess my point is, like, you're not going to... Yeah. Okay, so the analogy, right? Democrats went on this crusade of, like, we're just going to own him until he goes away. And that would not have worked without coronavirus. But if your strategy in the face of Trump screwing you, Trump telling you he was going to do something and then doing the opposite, if your strategy and answer to that is to re-elect him and institutionalize that sort of bullshit and make it to where he is completely absolved of any accountability because he never has to run for re-election again, he just got 4 years of just woo, right? If your answer to that, instead of like, look, I don't like Joe Biden, he's a piece of shit, but at least he believes the earth is round, or at least he believes that climate change is real, or at least he believes that, like, you know, police violence exists. He may not want to do anything about it, and he may say we need to give more money to the police and shit, but at least he acknowledges that it exists. At least he is a movable politician who occasionally goes, oh, okay. Rather than just, like, a force of nature that just, like, goes from, that hopscotches from scandal to scandal over and over and over again in order to avoid having to deal with said scandals. I mean, come on, man. As Joe Biden would say. Like, come on. Like I said, I understand how you feel. It's very upsetting to get played by somebody who you thought was going to deliver the America that you think America should be. In a certain sense, I feel that way about Bernie also. Because Bernie has had to fade into obscurity in the face of all of this chaos. When he could use his political power and people liking him and him having a large base of support to force Joe Biden to be a compassionate human being and to start moving this country actually to the left. But he will not. So I feel that disenchantment for Bernie too. It's okay to be disenchanted with politicians. They're not good people. And Trump is a politician now. The guy has run the free world for 4 years. So they're not good people. Ultimate power corrupts, or absolute power corrupts absolutely every time. They're not good people. You should not lionize them. You should not invest your personal stake of, like, what could be good and what could be bad about America in these idiots. So, I don't know, man. I guess, like, it's time to just wake up and smell the kafifi, my friend. Like, it's over with. The guy is a con artist. You've been conned. Now, we may be getting conned in real time by Joe Biden. It's possible. Maybe. But in this specific circumstance, the devil you know is not better than the devil you don't. Because there is no upside in the devil you know. There is not going to be any meaningful change or any meaningful improvement to the material conditions of people's lives under Trump. It's just not going to happen. Because he denies that there is a problem in people's material lives. In any measure. At least Joe Biden acknowledges 2 or 3% of the problems in people's material lives. And we can push him to acknowledge 50 or 100. Who knows? But at least that's an actual avenue to doing anything. So, and I also want to say, I'm not advocating that you vote either way. Your individual vote probably does not matter. Your individual vote is probably, especially if you're not using it for any sort of, like, strategy, or you're not then going on to help that vote mean something, and you're just showing up every 4 years to vote, then okay, stay home. Who cares? That's nonsense. Erratic, and he's clearly self-enriching. And you can't get anywhere with that. So, this has been my Trump manifesto. But really, though, I think, I think it's just time to recognize that, like, it's a con. And it was a long con, and it was really, really well executed. I mean, really, really well done. But if you're still in the camp of, like, posting about it, like being like, yay, Trump, then you're just owning yourself. Like, it's just an enormous cell phone. Because by saying yay, Trump, you're literally saying, like, yay, no stimulus checks for anybody. It's pretty direct. Like, everybody sees that. So, I'm sorry. Like I said, I know what it's like. I feel for you. Like, I feel it right here in my heart. You put all your political stock in somebody, they completely screw you, and you end up worse off. Everybody around you ends up worse off. I know, man. I believed in Obama. We elected him. And then our family lost our house. You know what I mean? Like, the financial crisis. In the aftermath of the financial crisis. So, I know that. I get it. I get being screwed. But, It's time to turn that energy into actually doing something meaningful, productive, and really, like, I hate to sound like sappy and shit, but like compassionate. Like at this point, a vast, vast majority of the country is experiencing some form of misery. They are experiencing some sort of like serious downgrade in their quality of life. And so we have to do something about that. Because if we don't, then what's the point of having a government?